as is with DeMar DeRozan there. No other moves made yet. I said this is the floor for this team if they're healthy is 52 wins. A
Hmm.
lot of people thought I was bugging. A lot of people thought I was doing a little too much.
DraftKings said 45.5 today.
DraftKings is smoking. And I don't mean that in a good way.
Hmm.
All right, they tripping on that. Or no, do whatever you want, DraftKings. I need to go back to Maryland and place a bet. That's what I need to do. I'm going over. Going over
It's
big
a long
time.
way to go to
I'm
place a bet.
betting all of D'Lo's money that they're going over. That's for sure.
Let's take a chunk out of that marble floor and go to Maryland.
Oh man, that
you'll get a cut.
What can we get with that? What can we get with that? We can get.
Might be able to buy the sports book.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Matter of fact, they probably report us.
You get half of the sports
book. If we
book.
took that money from half of that marble floor, just the tile, not the whole thing, just half of the tile, and we said, "Yo, we want to place this money on whatever," they report us. They'd be like, "Nah, this is you guys doing too much. What's this drug money?" They probably say something crazy.
What are you guys, Jonte Porter?
No one believes you when you guys do this,
well,
and the fact that
it's true,
you're in on this is ridiculous.
I'm a neutral party. I help you out sometimes. I help him out.
But I think this is a 52-win team, and you, I'm kind of like being a little stubborn with the whole thing because thought about it a little bit. Maybe it's more like 50, right? Like maybe I think it's a 50-win team. I'll put it exactly at 50. But I said 52. I stood on business. I'm not going to go back now. So I'm going to say 52. And I think that's what this team is as is. That's before they add anything. If they add anything more. And we got to the point last week where I was like, I don't really know if they need to add much. Like, I won't say need, but like when people are talking about, oh, they might still look at Lauri Markkanen. They may still look at Kyle Kuzma. I don't know if those are the type of pieces they need to add anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking more at these super role players like a Finney Smith or Cam Johnson is kind of he teeters back and forth between the super role player and a guy like Kyle Kuzma. I'm looking more like those guys, not like the super scoring type of player.
I'd be surprised if they made I'd be surprised if they still had inquiries about Kyle Kuzma. I think initially there was. I think there was. They obviously like him. I think there's probably financial things with him that they need to. There's some hurdles there that they'll have to get over. And I also think with Kyle Kuzma, he's probably a move because of the number of years he has on his contract. He's probably a move that if you make a move that has money attached, like in a third year when you're starting to get into De'Aaron Fox money, big De'Aaron Fox money, you're starting to get into Keegan Murray rookie contract extension territory. You have to ask yourself, is Kyle Kuzma the one that makes us a contender? And I'm using Kyle Kuzma as the example. Find a player who has 3 years or 4 years on their deal, or who you have to add 3 or 4 years on the deal. So that could throw Brandon Ingram into this as well. Is that the player that makes us a championship contender? I think there's a lot of unclearable hurdles in the way of the Brandon Ingram thing. Kyle Kuzma, I don't know if they feel that way, especially now after signing DeMar DeRozan. So I'm with you in the sense that, like, I think, yeah, sure, 50 to 52, sure. Yeah. I think this team has solidified themselves as a top 6 team. I think, man, we there was a group text that I got caught up on a little late, but it was about the Rockets and our man Kamara, and God damn, sports fans love hope. They real like sports fans just love sight unseen. It's like, okay, yeah, there was a little something there with Houston. Okay, like I'm sorry, we got Houston as a top 6 team. We got Houston as a top 8 team. someone explain to me how and why.
I feel like Houston missed an opportunity this offseason. We heard all that, like, oh yeah, they're building up for KD or building up for a big move. And
Yeah, they were building
they
up for
didn't-
something that
they
wasn't
didn't-
there.
Yeah, they didn't capitalize on
Uh,
it.
It was the Knicks with LeBron in 2010. Like, well,
But
there's nothing there for
I
you.
saw them out just a little bit with this summer. They're building up for it doesn't have to be this summer. Like they're building up to be ready probably next summer, maybe the trade deadline or something like that. And I get that. I think it was from everything that I heard. I don't know, maybe Houston was thinking that on their own, but it was never real. You know, when you hear like the KDs
Yeah,
and stuff.
yeah, right.
Like maybe
Right.
And I don't even know.
That's what I'm saying. They were building for something that wasn't there.
But I was about to say I don't even know if they necessarily use that type of wording. I don't know how the reporting got there.
It's not what Woj said.
Well, Woj been shaky at best as of late.
Woj went rogue.
Been shaky at best. But I could see them, even if let's just say for argument's sake, they were building up because they wanted to make an offer for KD. And Phoenix was like, we're not trading him. Matter of fact, it should be tweeted out as much. We're not trading him. It's not issue. All right, cool. We'll just keep all these assets for the next guy that comes along.
Mhm.
Whether it's guy always comes up, but like Carl Anthony Towns or
He really does.
Anthony
His name always
Davis or
comes up.
something like that. Like we'll be ready when the time comes. And I don't have a problem with that. That's fine. Especially when you're not necessarily going to win big this year. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying you're going to be bad, but you're not going to win big this year. Part of that group text we talked about, like people high up on Houston, and I think Houston has a lot of talent. I mean, we can't forget what it was this past year. They had to win like 10 games in a row to get to a point where they could finish 5 back of the 10th spot. Like they were a middling team for the majority of this year. And to think that they'll go from being a middling team with all those young guys to a team that's going to be top 6, I just got to see it. I'm not saying it's impossible.
No, I'm with
I just
you.
got to see it. That's all it is.
Yeah, I'm with you. And that's why it's just fascinating. We just love hope. Sports fans love hope. And that's all Houston is like this projection that they're going to be like, I think there's this thought like Dylan Brooks and Fred VanVleet are like these super young guys who are going to develop even further. It's not a knock on either one of them. We know who they are. We know exactly who they are. Is that going to change?
I don't think so. Good ball players.
Like, no, I mean, again,
ball players.
I think there are good ball players there who have taken on the identity, not trying to make a joke, of their head coach. Their identity prior to his little, prior to that, he had established
Charles Barkley. He is no role model.
No, no one should follow his lead. Nobody. But yeah, I'm just not as sold on them as everyone else.
The other thing that I did want to get your thoughts on about just what I was thinking. I we hear about DeMar DeRozan, and on the surface, I'm like, yeah, that'd be cool. That'd be cool. I got my concerns about offensively how it would fit and all this other stuff, but no, that'd be good. That'd be okay. And then it becomes more of a reality, and you dive into it a little bit more, and you dive into the basketball aspect of it. You think about it a little bit more. Maybe you even sell yourself on it, right? I don't think that's what I'm doing, but that could be the case. And I'm like, nah, this is actually going to work out a lot. Like, I like the move a lot. It works out a lot more than I thought. And then for me, I just start to listen to DeMar DeRozan speak a little bit more. I see some other interviews. I see the way he speaks about the game and being a professional athlete and just winning. And then I'm like, oh, yeah, this makes a lot more sense. And then you got the introductory press conference. You hear them, and you hear little things that matter to people in our industry that maybe fans or anybody just overlook about how he gave each TV media member like almost an hour, like each one, and they all raved. They're like, "This doesn't happen. Like this is amazing." He sat down with Matt George. He sat down with Jay Gay, and he
I
sat
think he
down with
gave him a
Sean.
total of an hour.
Well, yeah, that's what. Did I say each one?
That
of
would have
them?
been amazing.
A total of just.
It's Monday. DeMar DeRozan still doing interviews with Sacramento Kings media.
with Complex Music's Sean Cunningham or whatever.
Hey, shout out Sean Cunningham.
It
I
was
saw
everywhere,
that.
man. But I was sitting there and I listened to him and I see the way he moves and stuff like that. I'm like, this might have been the perfect signing. And I didn't even realize it. Maybe Monty and all these other guys, but it's perfect for the professional that he is, the athlete that he is. I kept talking last week and I compared it to Kendrick Lamar, ironically, and all this other stuff. The disciplined nature that I get from hearing DeMar speak, and then that matches up with the way he plays basketball, right? In this 3-point shooting era, he says, "No, my bread is buttered 15 to 17 feet away, and you can't get me off of that. Like, I'm not gonna ride the wave and go do some others. No, this is where I'm gonna make my living." And there's a level of discipline to being able to do that in this era. And you kind of broke down like potentially first and second choices and stuff like that. I don't know if he was first or nothing like that, but I think they came to a point where it's like, this guy kind of be perfect for where we're at as a franchise and an organization. And I think it'll work big, saying that's how Monty and them thought. I bought into that. I'm a big believer in that. Do you think he's like the perfect guy for them right now, considering all the names that were on the board? The Marketins, Cruz, Ingram, all this other stuff. Feels like DeMar is the perfect one.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, all of the things that you laid out right there. I don't think I've ever heard media clap I actually wasn't sure what I was hearing. I thought you did it at first, and then I was like, we don't have a clap button. And I swear to you, I scrolled back because I was watching on Twitter. I scrolled back, which you can't do anymore. And I was like, yo, the crowd, the media popped. Okay. And I was just sitting there on the edge, I was sitting on the edge of the bed, just hanging on every word DeMar was saying. He does feel like the perfect player for this team in many regards. I know people want defending wings and 3-point shooters or rim protectors or all of these little phrases that they hear on podcasts and shows and read in articles and all that. And all of that's fine. It doesn't mean it's inaccurate, but attach a player's name to it. Because we did this with Kyle Kuzma. We found the flaws, the holes, or as you would say, the warts in Kyle Kuzma. We did it with Zach LaVine. We did it with Brandon Ingram. We've done it with every player we've tried to link or have linked in some way, shape, or form to Sacramento. Well, DeMar doesn't shoot the three the way everybody wants. All right. Weigh the good and the bad. And it feels like with DeMar, there's way more good. And man, how many times over this stretch have we talked about Mike Brown players and Monty McNair players? DeMar checks both boxes because we've wondered, this guy doesn't feel like a Monty guy, but he might be a Mike guy. This guy feels like a Mike guy. Oh, Monty doesn't really have a history of those types of guys. DeMar, his universal respect around the league, or it appears to be universal respect around the league, and the way that he plays, the way that he approaches the game, it feels like when you talk about warts with DeMar, all you're talking about is his age. And when you go back and you look at what he did last year, you have to at least acknowledge, well, age shouldn't be a part of the conversation right now, because he's not showing signs of, like with Chris Paul. Chris Paul is still one of the great point guards. I think San Antonio signing him is brilliant. But there's enough in recent years to go like, it's a little scary. If I'm San Antonio, we know what this is. Like, he's going to have as much, like, we know as we sign Chris Paul, he's probably going to have as much impact off the floor as he is on. And where we are right now as a franchise, that's really important to us. With DeMar, that's not something you need to look at right now. And that's probably not something that you're going to have to look at through the duration of his contract.
Right. And there was something that we read off. I don't know if you saw it too, but did you see the comparison with Paul George and DeMar DeRozan? Like, they just did this past year,
I
right?
don't
Or I
think
think
I
they did
did.
career and this past year, but basically DeMar was better numbers wise across the board,
Mhm.
and he's the same age. Or I think he's going to be 35 when the season starts. I think Paul George is going to be 34. But think about that though. Like, think about the prize that Paul George was
Yeah.
in this free agency, and
Mm.
it's turned Philly into a fringe contender and all this other stuff. And you got a guy in DeRozan who's basically the same age with better numbers. The Kings got him,
Mhm.
and it's just great. It wasn't. I didn't take it as a knock on either player. It was just like, people look at Paul George as this super high caliber free agent. Well, the Kings were just able to get a guy that put up better numbers across the board and is around the same age. So, yeah, I just think I thought about it
Why
more
do
and
you think
more
that is?
that Paul George.
Yeah. They're not looked at as the same, I don't want to say type of player, the same tier
Mm-hmm,
of player.
mm-hmm.
Why?
By some, right? Like, as with the last couple of weeks have played out, there are people who are scoffing at the notion of Paul George going to Philadelphia, making them a contender. And then one thing that I have learned, and we kind of talked about too, and you just mentioned it, there is a high level of reverence and respect, at least from the media, for DeMar DeRozan.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? When people that we were expecting to like sound crazy about this deal, the Kevin O'Connells, the Tim Bontemps, those guys, they were like, no, it's actually a pretty good deal. Like, I'm cool with the deal. DeRozan is this, he's that, he's that. Like, Kings did good for themselves. They got better. You know what I mean? But I think Paul George is a little bit more captivating. When you see a guy that size being able to play. I remember I told you, I think for the first time, maybe 2 years ago or whatever, when we were at the beginning of one of we were there for one of the Kings games, and it was when they were shooting around or whatever. And I don't know, maybe it was my first time being that close to Paul George. And I like turned to you, I was like, he's hella tall. Like, he's like a legit 6'9". And then you think about how he plays. He plays like Dame Lillard, his style, crossing over, pulling up, doing all this other stuff. It's like, this guy's great. So I think he's just he just kind of captivates people a little bit more with his style of play than what he's able to do. A little flashier or whatever the case may be. And DeRozan just kind of he's a little more workman, it feels like.
Yeah, because I'm glad you used that phrase, because in today's NBA, what gets the most attention? Trade
Flash.
trade requests,
Mm,
right? Like,
mhm,
that's
mhm,
like you're
mhm,
you're a top tier player. You're stuck in Indiana. Get me out of here. You're a top tier player in Toronto, of all freaking places,
mhm.
and you can't get over the hump. You're winning 60 games and you're getting your ass kicked by LeBron James in the playoffs. DeMar's just traded.
Yeah.
DeMar never asked to be traded. He was just, nobody made an uproar about that, right?
Mhm.
DeMar was just a player involved in a trade. And that gets far less attention than the guy who says, get me out of here. That gets far less attention than the guy who shows up to what is believed to be his last game in a franchise with a "That's all, folks" t-shirt on, saying, "Oh, I don't even pick out my own clothes."
That was crazy.
Okay. All right, cool. We're going to spend our time just going nuts over that
Mhm,
and not over the dude who busted his ass in Toronto or San Antonio
mhm,
or Chicago. And the Chicago thing was tough because for a minute they were good, but that was it.
mhm.
They were nothing more, they were nothing less. They were good. and then they weren't.
Right.
And probably not a lot of fault to like the talent there, but you just injury after injury. Losing Lonzo, it was just so devastating. Lonzo was such a phenomenal playmaker. Losing him was death. And then things just started piling on one another. And so you already had a team that was just good. So to lose a piece on a team that's just good just puts you in a brutal position. And then of course one piece became two pieces, became three pieces.
Right.
And now they're like Chicago is in, this is something we could probably save for another day because Zach LaVine was such a part of the conversation. Chicago is in a very unique place in hell right now that I don't know how they get out of, because we focus on Zach LaVine and we know that, maybe they want to try to get out of this Lonzo Ball year. They still got Vucevic for like 40.
Yeah, big Vooch. They re-signed him
right
like a year
and
ago.
It's like you guys are drowning and no one is going to throw you a life raft at this point. You might have to trade away your future assets just to get off of that money, or bite the bullet and know you're probably going to stink for the next handful of years.
Yeah,
or maybe not stink. You're not going to be god awful, but you're just not going to be able to compete in that conference the next handful of years.
And the crazy thing about that is they got players that can play. You got Kobe White who had a little bit of a breakout season. You got
Your boy.
I saw who can play as well. They got guys that can play, but it's just not matching up. Like what might have to happen is they might have to give up one of those guys. Like to get rid of Vooch, they might have to give up Kobe White, which would be a good foundational piece for what you're trying to do. But to get off those contracts, you have to attach like not just picks, but like players that you really like.
And that's almost how you start completely from scratch, is you give up and that's what people look at Utah is Lauri Markkanen in 27 turning 28 or whatever it is. Like, right, maybe he's going to like peak as these other guys that we have are ascending. And that's the only argument I could see for moving on from Lauri Markkanen, if you're able to get these level of assets that they're talking about. With Chicago, like, I don't know what Kobe White gets you, especially if you're giving up, especially if the mandatory thing is you got to take Vucevic with him.
Right.